I'm back. I wanted to talk to you guys today about this book, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. I have not read this since I was a child, and I wanted to go ahead and reread this one first, because anyone who's been following my channel for a second, you know I'm going through the Disney Twisted Tales. And while that's based off of Disney's version, this is my next read, Unbirthday, which is the Alice in Wonderland retelling. And I did actually, as you can tell, kind of start reading it, and I realized this is kind of going to be going from the perspective of like a sequel, but like years later when she's a grown adult. So I was like, well, since I haven't actually read Alice in Wonderland since, I don't know, puberty, I should go ahead and reread it. First thing I want to say is I like the cover, but I also kind of hate it for the book. Like, I like the artwork itself, but I don't like it as a cover for this book because it kind of perpetuates the false idea that Alice in Wonderland has anything at all to do with drugs, because it doesn't. And I can totally see and I completely support the people who want to kind of do their own retellings or whatever from that kind of perspective, or even from the like, is Alice crazy perspective. But if you like actually read the book, or rather the books, I should say, Through the Looking Glass is a second, but usually you find them together. So if you actually read the book, it's absolutely not about drugs, and it, yeah, I don't know. So this kind of like it being all super like, I don't know, 60s hippie-ish, like looks a little bit like an LSD trip or something, or like you're taking mushrooms. I don't know. It's cool artwork, but I don't know. I would have gone with something different. So anyway, not that the cover of the book really matters, because what I wanted to actually talk to you guys about is what have really appreciated going through and rereading this as an adult. Because as a child, even when I saw the original Disney animation, or even like some of the more live action ones that they've made over the years, like there's been so many Alice in Wonderland remakes, right? Even in games and stuff. And so, like, it's easy to get kind of like to forget what the actual story is about. But so going through it has been really fun. This is like the original old school like idea of a trope that nowadays a lot of people are not fans of, which is, it was all a dream. But I really love how it was done in this, and I feel like if more stories with that kind of trope were done in this kind of way, they wouldn't be so obnoxious. And maybe this is just my own perception, because when I read things, I am very into like metaphors and symbolism and like the deeper meaning. And I've heard some people say that there's not really meant to be a deeper meaning to these, that these are just dreams that this little child is having, and that's like the whole point of the story, and that's why there's so much nonsense. But here's the thing, I don't know, reading that myself, I still feel like there's some kind of symbolism going on. I feel like this is a combination of obviously like the mind of a child trying to work out the adult world that she's growing up in. And obviously this was written in like the 1800s. I don't even remember the exact year. Hang on, let me check. Well, I don't even know where the like original year was. The first Signet Classics, the first edition was in 1960, but like the actual story itself was written, I think, like in the 1860s or something. I don't know. Probably should have looked that up. But so yeah, it's this little girl trying to figure out like and it reads very much like you can see how she falls into the dream right down there. Like she chases the rabbit down the rabbit hole, and like as she falls, it gets like slower and slower, and it's almost like you can see like in her, it's very like stream of consciousness, right? You can see as like she's thinking as she's falling, like you can see her mind kind of go to this like you can see her go from more like her world to like slipping into the idea of like none of this really makes sense, but then she just kind of accepts it the way that you do when you're dreaming and weird things happen, but it feels totally normal in your dream. I also really like how, like, at the very beginning of it, she looks through to see, at the beginning of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, she looks through to see this like garden that she's trying to get to, and eventually when she actually does get there at the end of the first story, like that's like the end of her journey altogether. So it's almost like there is this like planning out like to see where she's headed, but in order for her to get there, she goes through all these different, like every chapter is like a different weird interaction she has with all these dream creatures. And I really liked it because you could, let me see if I can like put this into words properly, because it's just a little hard to like express with just words, but like that's like the nature of the dream thing, right? Like it's so well done. And so I think what it is that I'm trying to say is, you know how like when you're dreaming, everything that's in your head is kind of like a part of your own self, your own consciousness, right? Like thoughts and feelings you had throughout the day that your brain is trying to unravel and process. And it reads very much like that, again, from a more childlike perspective. But there's even like, okay, before I get ahead of myself. So the way that it feels dreamlike is because, except for the Cheshire Cat, all the other characters, despite all the nonsense and the like wordplay and things that are going on, they all understand each other. Like you can see it as they're interacting. Like Alice gets what they're saying and they get what she's saying. And even when she's confused, it reads very much like she's having an argument with herself or a debate with herself. Like I don't know how else to explain it, but it's really, really fun. I really enjoyed it. Another thing that well, and that's the thing too. Okay, with the Cheshire Cat, I don't know exactly what Carol meant, if anything, by doing this, but the Cheshire Cat in the first story is the only one who actually is aware that Alice and everyone in Wonderland is mad, and that she could only exist there if it's basically, it feels like the Cheshire Cat, especially because he's also the only one that has any like superpowers, kind of like he can disappear and come and go as he pleases, and it actually like saves him from losing his head, right? And I feel like that, at least for me, the way that I read it is almost like this idea of like a higher self or your like higher consciousness, right? Like dreams come from the subconscious, but it's almost like the Cheshire Cat is this like metaphor for her actual consciousness, that's like he's the one who's like trying to help her see that what she's experiencing is just a dream, and he's the one that ultimately starts like help to like kind of set things in motion towards the end that like help her realize she's dreaming to begin with and kind of help wake her up. And it's a very similar vibe when you go through the Looking Glass. It's the same kind of all these weird interactions. It vibes a little different, but that one I thought was really cool because it's basically like she's like playing this big chess game. I think a lot of people don't realize that like the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland is not the same thing as the Red Queen. In Through the Looking Glass, those get mixed up a lot. Like the Disney animation was really kind of a blend of both stories. Like they took some of the fun stuff of both things, but I feel like after rereading this, none of the adaptations I've ever seen have really done it justice. I don't think that people are, again, people can interpret, if you're doing an adaptation, you can interpret things however you want, but I feel like this story, like that the real point of it is to just kind of explore that like dream world environment. It's not supposed to be a deep thinking thing, but I think if it was written more for an adult, then it probably, like, how could you avoid the deep thinking? You know what I mean? Because like dreams can get pretty deep sometimes. And so this is actually like really inspiring me to like, I don't know, just for fun, like try to write my own, like mimic the idea with what's going on in this book, but like from more my own perspective. Because I don't know about you guys, but I have a very, and have always had a very active dream world. And for me, I think that's what really resonated in reading this now as an adult. Like as a child, it was very confusing and kind of weird and kind of creepy, and but like not creepy in a way that you could actually put your finger on. It was just like creepy in an off way. And I think that like going through now as an adult, it's like way more interesting because it's like this is how my dreams actually tend to play out. Like it's usually like they're all loosely connected, but like there'll be different like scenes in them, and they like might not necessarily feel connected until like the very end or something, and then all these weird things come together, you know. And so like it really, I think that's why I loved it so much, because it felt very much like that to me. And I do really appreciate like I said, I don't know if creepy is even the right word, because it's not, you don't get scared, you don't get anxious or anything like that reading through this, but it has that same sense of like, you know how like when you're a really, really little kid and you don't really have a concept of like things like death, for example, so like all the like talk of beheading and like losing one's head. I think that there's symbolism in that of like going along with the whole mad, am I mad? Am I like, what's going on around me kind of thing. I definitely think there is symbolism with that, but like there's also something to be said about that vibe of like child innocence, where it's like, yes, Alice gets uncomfortable, she doesn't want to lose her head, but she doesn't like freak out in the way that you would expect if you were having a queen yelling to like cut off your head. And I've literally had dreams like that. I had a dream when I was like 8 or 9 that I was like I was like joining some weird like cult of women. It was only women, and at one point in the dream, one of the women in the cult like very seriously wanted to chop off my head. It was really weird. It was not any time around the time that I was familiar with this book, but it was definitely, it was weird and it was very disturbing. And in the dream, like you'd think if that was happening in real life, you would like run away, right? But in the dream world, you're just kind of like, oh, that's how you feel about me. Okay. And you're uncomfortable, but not enough to actually do anything about it. So I don't know. Maybe again, maybe that's why it vibed is really creepy to me, because like on a personal level, it like felt kind of similar to a dream that I'd had once as a child. So I don't know if any of that's like, if you guys get what I'm saying with this. But yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you're into this like weird kind of stuff anyway, or if you've ever been a fan of Alice in Wonderland, I would definitely recommend rereading this as an adult and, you know, see kind of how you feel about it, because it was really fun and really interesting. And yeah, like it definitely inspired me. I don't know, like to write kind of a more adult modern version, but like instead of just making it a bunch of nonsense, actually go deep with certain things. You know, kind of base it off like my own dreams or something. And I don't know if that's a project that I would ever like share publicly or not. It's not something I've necessarily decided on. Because this is just, I'm just saying this is what this book is inspiring in me. And that's like the main reason that I myself like to read books. Aside from like escapism and stuff, I like to read so that I can get inspired and think like, ooh, like what are some ideas that I can implement in my own writing, or like sometimes just to experiment. I don't know if you guys have ever read a book, especially like older books, or books where like the authors, every author has their own specific kind of language or style that they write in, right? But like you can really notice it with certain ones more than others. And if you've ever like, when you first finish reading a book that's written in a certain type of style, and then you sit down to try to write yourself, even if you're writing something totally different, for me at least, if I do that, like I'll find myself writing in the same kind of style of the book I just read in. So yeah, I don't know. I have to catch myself when I do that. Like I can't finish a book and then sit down and immediately start writing. I usually need to like take a second in between, because otherwise I just feel like I'm starting to just like take on the personality of that author, or not the personality, their writing style of that author. Anyway, now I'm just rambling, but this was really fun. I am going to jump into Unbirthday probably next. So thank you guys so much for being here today. If you have thoughts on Alice in Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass that you'd like to share, please comment below. Talk to me about things that you noticed about it, whatever the case may be. For anyone who has been following me for a minute, you know that I, for a hot second there, is posting 2 videos a week. I'm trying to get back to that. I'm just kind of going through a bit of a busy time in my personal business right now. Just have some extra clients and things, so I haven't had as much time, but I promise you will always get at least 1 video a week from me. Hopefully I'll be able to get back to 2 a week very soon, but it might not be you know, for a few more weeks because just a little adjustment period right now. But thank you guys so much for being here. Anyone who has subscribed already, I really, really appreciate it. And if you are new to my channel or have been here before but haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. It really makes me feel super warm and fuzzy, and yeah, it just also helps out this channel. So thank you guys so much. I will see you all very soon.